You know those stories that just stick with you? The kind that make the hair on your arms stand up and linger in your mind way after you've heard them? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. A collection of those kinds of encounters, firsthand accounts that really blur the line between what we know and what we can't explain. So, let's get into it.
Now, you might just think this is all fun campfire folklore, but our fascination with the unexplained is way more widespread than you might guess. According to a Gallup poll, a surprising 1 in 3 Americans believes in some form of paranormal activity. That is a huge number of people who are open to the idea that there's more going on in our world than what we can see.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Have you ever seen something just out of the corner of your eye or heard a noise in a house you knew was empty? That little personal connection to the unknown is what makes these stories so powerful. So, with that in mind, our first stop is a few places where history and the supernatural seem to be, well, overlapping.
We're going to start with some of America's most famous haunted locations. These are the places where strange events have pretty much become part of the local legend.
First up is the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. Its reputation is, of course, legendary, mostly because a stay here is what inspired Stephen King to write The Shining. So, in 2016, a guest named Henry Yao was exploring the hotel, just taking photos. He specifically waited for the grand staircase to be completely empty before he snapped a picture.
What happened next was just deeply strange. First, Yao suddenly got violently ill, out of nowhere. Later, when he was looking back through his photos from the trip, he saw it. In that picture of the supposedly empty staircase, a figure was clearly standing right at the top.
Paranormal experts jumped on this, suggesting a classic theory, that the spirit was drawing energy from him to manifest, which is what caused his illness. But Yao himself, he's still uncertain. And this is the perfect example of these kinds of stories. You've got an unsettling event, a piece of photographic evidence, and a lingering, unanswerable question.
Okay, let's move to a place with a much, much darker history. The Lizzie Borden house in Massachusetts. Yep, the site of that gruesome double murder in 1892. It's a museum now, and on this one day, a tour was starting just like any other, with the guide asking everyone to please, silence their phones. And of course, just moments later, a phone rings. A guest looks up, totally embarrassed, and explains, "Sorry, it's my mom." A perfectly normal, everyday interruption, right? The guide asks if she needs to step outside to take the call. And the woman's response? She died 2 years ago. Can you just imagine the silence in that room? It's one of those small, completely inexplicable moments where technology collides with the impossible. And it's a story that just sticks with you. And for our last haunted landmark, we're going to what's often called America's most haunted house, the Whaley House in San Diego. Its grim reputation is definitely well-earned, since it was built right on the site of the city's old gallows. All kinds of spirits are said to linger here, from a criminal they called Yankee Jim to the former owners themselves. During one paranormal investigation, a team used a pretty common technique. They tried to capture an EVP, or an electronic voice phenomenon. They set up a recorder in an empty room and just asked a simple question into the silence. "Are you happy that we are here?" They didn't hear a thing at the time, but when they played that recording back, a clear, unmistakable voice had been captured, and it gave a chilling one-word answer: no. Sometimes the simplest response is the most terrifying. Famous haunted places are one thing. You can always leave. But what happens when the strange encounters follow you home? Let's explore what happens when the haunting gets personal. A woman named Marty got a vintage ventriloquist doll as a gift. It's like the classic setup for a horror movie, but for her family, it was terrifyingly real. They swore its plastic expression would change. They'd hear small footsteps at night, only to find the doll in a completely different room. Then it even started calling out their names. So the family decided they had to get rid of it, but this doll seemed indestructible. They tried burning it on a grill, but it wouldn't catch fire. They tried cutting it up. That failed. They threw it in the trash, and somehow it reappeared in the bin after the garbage truck had already left. Their final desperate solution was to bury it under a block of cement. In another story about haunting at home, a couple's sister was visiting with her newborn baby. On the very first night, she woke up to a truly terrifying sight, an old woman she didn't know, just standing silently over the baby's crib.
As she later recounted, her protective instincts just kicked in. She said, "I woke up and I had to tell her to get away." Well, the family later found out that the home's previous owner, a 90-year-old woman, had died in a fire in that very room. And in ghost lore, that's often the key, isn't it? A spirit with a history tied to a location. The family, very wisely, moved out.
But, these encounters aren't just confined to old buildings. Sometimes the most unsettling things happen in the most ordinary places, like your car. These next stories suggest that these events can happen to anyone, anywhere.
So, a man named Jeff was driving with his 3-year-old son, Miles. As they passed a quiet cemetery, Miles, who'd been singing happily, suddenly went silent. He pointed out the window and said, "Look at all those people!" Jeff looked, but he saw nothing. And what's really interesting here is the detail. When Jeff asked what he was talking about, Miles replied, "All those people over there. There sure are a lot of grandmas. They're all standing there, looking down at the grass." It just sends a chill down your spine, tapping into that common idea that children are more perceptive to the paranormal. But the most unsettling part came later. Completely unprompted, Miles turns to his dad and clarifies, "Those people we saw, they weren't alive. They were all paused." Paused? What a strangely specific and unnerving word for a 3-year-old to use. Our final story is a kind of variation on the classic vanishing hitchhiker legend. As a teenager, a driver named Julie passed the scene of a fatal car accident. A moment later, she looked over, and a panicked, confused woman was just there in her passenger seat. Julie actually calmed the woman down, who then peacefully looked toward the sun and just vanished. So after hearing all these accounts, from haunted hotels to phantom passengers, we're left in that gray area, that space between belief and skepticism. These stories are personal, powerful, and profoundly strange, and they reflect a deep human fascination with what might lie beyond. Ultimately, that's the one question we can't definitively answer. Are these the wild imaginations of storytellers? Are they just tricks our minds play on us in moments of fear or stress? Or just maybe, are they authentic glimpses into a reality that exists just beyond the edges of our understanding? What you choose to believe? Well, that's up to you.